Until they arrive, why don't we fill things in? If anybody's got a question, run up to that microphone and yell it at me, and I'll bullshit a little bit until we get the rest of the people here. Yes, here comes the first one. Thank you for not letting me sit here idly for the next 5-10 minutes.
No, I'm from Michigan too, so I can't leave you out there like that.
Could you say it a little bit louder?
I'm from Michigan too, so I can't leave you out there like that.
Okay, we're getting a vibrate, and
You can't hear me?
I can now. Yeah, now.
Okay. I'm from Michigan too. I couldn't leave you hanging out there like that.
Oh, I've just been hanging out and wandering around doing the beach thing, a little zip lining, helicopter ride over Kauai. You know, I'm being a tourist. I've been having a good time. You know, a terrible burden coming over here and all that, but you know, I'll suffer through it.
So, probably the main question a lot of people have, how did you come up with the concept for the Infinity Gauntlet?
Okay, the Infinity Gauntlet started off with my going to a parochial school in my early years. I was had constant Catholicism pounded into me 6 days a week. That stuck. And so when I finally started working on Thanos and that, it occurred to me what it would be like if this God who I've always been taught was loving and caring was nasty, petty, and vindictive. And so we had Infinity Gems from a previous story I did. They were just a throwaway. And I gathered them up and figured that each one of them had a certain aspect of what reality would be all about, or the universe would be about. And my first thought was to stick them around his head, and decided against that, so we put it on the glove, and that's how the gauntlet came about. More of a design thing than any other significance.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's see what this guy behind you has to ask.
Hi, Jim.
How you doing?
Nice seeing you again. I did ask you this in person one time, but I was just wanted to kind of reamp on that. You know, I always thought that Thanos was a very complicated character, personality-wise. I just wanted to see how you came up with that concept of Thanos' character.
Well, I never liked black and white characters. I'd like them to have some dimension to it. If somebody's just pure evil, well, he's good for about one story, and then you get rid of him. But we had Dr. Doom running around in the Fantastic Four, and he was this very complicated character that you would sometimes feel a bit of sympathy for. He had this terribly scarred face, apparently. And his ambivalence toward his adversaries, I always found kind of intriguing. His past relationship with Reed Richards, and you know, his wanting to be a dominant force, but at the same time having this caring nature toward his people in sort of a brutal sort of way. So when Thanos came along, I never wanted to make him just a villain. And as he went along, it became apparent that he sometimes, as many times as he endangered the universe, he saved it from outside forces, probably for selfish reasons, always for selfish reasons because he was Thanos, but it made him sort of a good bad guy and an anti-hero, and I just found him much more interesting playing with him in that way than doing it otherwise. I always had trouble with heroes. I'm much better with the bad guys.
Yeah, you really are. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot for that.
Okay, what's that say about me?
Just FYI, I recently read Infinity Gauntlet, and I just hate that I liked Thanos.
I'm keeping us busy. Okay. All right.
Hi, Jim. I wanted to know if you're happy with the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Thanos. And are there any changes that you wanted to do, if you could?
What was the last part?
If you're happy with the current iteration of Marvel Cinematic Universe Thanos, and if there were any changes you would make to the character right now, if you could.
Okay, no, I'm very happy with what they did with him. before I saw the actual film, I was a little put off at the fact that they got rid of his uniform. But the way they did it, it said, gee, why didn't I do that in the book? I mean, why does he need all that armor after he gets 2 of the gems, 3 of the gems, whatever it was, 2 of the gems in the movie? Yeah, I think Josh Brolin just did a terrific job. I just love the way he made the character move in that.
We got here.
Okay, we're filling in here slowly but surely.
They finally told me about this.
Yes. The only thing I would have changed, the blue eyes. I'm still getting used to the blue eyes. I kind of like the yellow glowing ones, and when he got mad, they go red. But we still got another movie to go through, and I mentioned this to the Russo's brothers, so who knows?
Thank you.
Did you guys know Coy, everybody?
How we doing, guys? I'm Coy from Collider Heroes.
One more Collider guy. One more Collider guy.
I am so honored to be here. How we doing, folks? We are assembling our gems. Our Infinity Gems are appearing on the stage one at a time. They will all be here. I grew up with these 2 men telling me all the stories that shaped my entire life.
Sorry to have warped your existence like that.
I even modeled my facial hair the same. Like this is my entire life's forming here. So I have to know.
We're getting clippers. We're getting clippers.
By the time this panel's done, I'll have joined them fully. But I'm actually going to tangent off his question. That was a great question. I was wondering the scope of Infinity War Gauntlet Crusade is enormous. Was there anything that when you first saw the movie that surprised you they were able to accomplish cinematically?
You know, when I did this, there was no computers to do the special effects for movies when I wrote the Infinity Gauntlet. And I never expected Thanos to be up on the screen because, quite frankly, he's not Spider-Man, he's not Superman, he doesn't quite, he's pretty esoteric and strange, so I figured he would be the last of my creations to make it.
Yeah.
Plus, he was my first creation. My career's been going downhill right from the start. No, I was very pleased with it. Brolin, the 2 writers, they didn't have the same universe to play with that I did, and so it had to be different. So I never came in thinking I was going to see a carbon copy, but what I did see, I didn't have any problems with it at all. And it's been working out pretty nicely since then.
For everybody,
There
I'd
we
say.
go, another
All right.
All right, and now we're on.
The entire gauntlet has been assembled.
I know going in lonely.
All right, so this is an insane historic moment. This is such a thing to experience. I feel the power from up here. I hope you guys do as well. This is monumental. So we were just talking about how the movie accomplished so much from such a large scope comic. Was there any single moment or scene where you're like, I can't believe that translated? Because the whole movie was that for me. But
Every time somebody went like this, I went, ooh, ooh.
I just found it very interesting that it took them 2.5 hours to do what Jim and I managed to do, like 15 pages with that snapping of the finger, it took forever for him to finally snap that finger of his,
Yeah, come on, move around.
You know when George draws, he has to have the sweat of his brow on the pages so they don't catch on fire by the speed at which he draws them.
these are great problems to have in comic writing. Was there a scene that didn't appear that you all wanted? Was there any moment you were like, I could have used, besides Moon Knight, because that's my thing.
But I missed the Silver Surfer. I did kind of miss that thing.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I actually shot a half hour of Thanos' backstory that they had to cut out of the movie. They had all sorts of things taking place on Titan and sort of an origin of what was happening, and they told me about this ahead of time, and then about a month or so before the movie came out, I got an email from Joe Russo saying, we're kind of shorting things. So, and at first I thought they were going to put this into the DVD, but apparently it would have taken too much money to just do the special effects on it, so it's scrapped, which is too bad. Yeah.
We're all waiting for that 9-hour cut on Blu-ray in 10 years. We'll get it, guys. Just keep
maybe,
asking.
I could be wrong, but I seem to remember a scene in the comic book where Thanos moons Wolverine. Was that in the movie?
Well, the Fox Marvel merger is going to make that possible very soon.
All right.
It's coming.
Maybe I'm mixing that up with a wish of mine. I don't know.
They're coming out with the word balloon. They always
right.
So this is a comic-specific question because the art of comics is appreciated here, which I love. You guys reading comics tangibly. How did you go about building the layouts for these books? Because even all these years later, the book feels enormous. It has a scope that's really hard to capture. What was the communication between you like for the layouts and the scope of the book?
Well, actually, for me, I mean, Jim was writing a full script, so he pretty much knew what he wanted there. And for me, the biggest challenge is to take, okay, what Jim would do and then how filter it through my own layout sensibility. And I've had a great time with it. I mean, I was not as familiar with a lot of the characters since I was doing so much work for DC at the time. But, you know, I was enamored with the Thanos character and like, you know, just his infatuation and with death in the feminized form. I said, okay, this is kind of cool and kind of weird. And I said, okay, but this is Jim Starlin, obviously. And for me, it was just, as Jim knew at the time, was that, give me an excuse to draw as many characters as I can get into this one book. That seems to be the modus operandi for all the projects I go on. You know, that's obviously why I'm being incarcerated. I'm to be retiring now, but I did enjoy that. And like, unfortunately for me, which I'm grateful for Ron, I was also trying to do that plus War of the Gods over at DC Comics, and there's just so much one man can do, and I was having a hard time on that book, so I had to drop out. And to give a story that a lot of people don't know, I was asked just to not finish issue number 4 and jump onto issue 5 with Ron filling in on issue 4. And I always thought that all the stuff that I was doing from Jim's script and all the references I had, Ron was the visual architect in a lot of that stuff. So I thought Ron really should be doing Infinity Gauntlet. And I was really glad when they gave me a chance to let Ron do it. And I'm glad that Ron got a chance to share in that because you did so much of the building for that.
Yeah, actually, up until the last moment, I thought Ron was going to be drawing it. I finally got a call from Craig Anderson, who we should have really had up here, but telling me that Jude hopped on because multiple characters and all that.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, but to backtrack to your own story, I had it all laid out on little pieces of plywood on 3x5 cards, and I had just maybe a year before taken Robert McKee's screenwriting class, and so I was breaking it down into positive and negative scenes, alternating, and I had the whole thing laid out in my studio on boards before I ever started doing the typing on it. So it was constructed meticulously.
Yeah. What do you guys think about the rise? Like, comics obviously need to evolve, and they've changed a lot in the last, especially the last decade. How do you guys see like graphic novels versus single issues versus like digital? Is there a preference for you when you're outlining something or planning something? Is there a format you prefer?
I don't give it much thought. I'm just doing the story, and I know what the page format is the only thing that really has anything to do with me. If it's digital or what have you, or goes off to film, that's another creature entirely. But they tell me how many pages I got to fill up, and I go from there.
Yeah, for a while, some of the graphic novels were proportionately different. They were slightly wider than the average pages, so that just affected the layout in that degree. But again, the number of pages just means, okay, how many more things can I fill in per page? And the larger the page, maybe I can draw the characters larger, or I can just draw more characters in. Guess which one wins, you know?
So this is for each of you individually. We've seen this rise of the MCU the last 10 years, which has been incredible. It's changed cinema, it's changed the culture. Is there a character, now that we're going into phase 4 and things might be ending very dramatically, is there an MCU edition you would personally, no budget restrictions, who would you put in there? Because I want a Moon Knight show so bad. Is there someone you want to add to the MCU?
Surfer.
Yeah, Surfer? And any character, no budget restrictions. Silver Surfer down here.
Well, I just said that too, yeah.
So, sorry.
Everyone would figure I'd be wanting Adam Warlock in there, but I really want to bring Pip in there.
I mean, for me, because you got Rob in the Silver Surfer movie was fantastic. First, getting Galactus to look like Galactus, and we're going to put him in there, yeah.
non-Cloud Galactus, please and thank you. So we're evolving into the Avengers Endgame. Things are about to change very dramatically. Have you guys been following along the Hulu series? We're getting adult animated shows. We're getting a MODOK show, a Hitmonkey show, a Howard the Duck show, and a Tigra and Dazzler show. The world of comics, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of these crazy characters, and Patton Oswalt's voicing MODOK. It's a glorious time. When you were starting up in comics, was there a character that we've already seen you never thought we'd get? So the kind of the opposite of the last question. Was there any character like, that'll never translate? I know you mentioned Thanos. Was there any character that's been so outlandish? Once they had a talking head of actually happened in Winter Soldier for Arnim Zola, I knew that everything was possible. That was my moment of like, we've reached peak comic. Rocket?
Yeah, no, translate.
Yeah, seeing that I was never a big fan of disco, I'm hoping we'll never see a Dazzler.
That's going to be interesting.
First, I have to say that I have a hard time hearing through all the echoing. But the thing is, I can't choose among my children. I can't be prejudiced against any of my children. So if they want me to put them in, hey, I put Vibe into Crisis on Infinite Earths. So I'll draw anybody that the writer conceives of putting in there. You know, I'm very democratic that way, or masochistic that way. Take your pick. You know?
I don't think so. No one occurs to me at the moment.
I'm waiting for Squirrel Girl. One day that'll be my next level of how. So be it the writing or the art, each and every character in all of these giant books feels very different. None of the voices blur, none of the characters read as not true to themselves. How many times did you guys meet when going through the art, going through the writing, to make sure all the characters' voices were authentic to the characters we all love?
Oh, that's something I'm pretty notorious for that. I try very hard not to do like a Perez version of the character, but opposed to, Perez version that's filtering the original or current creators of the book. It's like being a police artist who's being described a character that you may get a lot of different artists who have stylistic differences, but you can tell it's the same character. I tend to be bothered by characters who are only differentiated by their costumes. Like when I was doing Infinity Gauntlet, of course I was looking at Ron's and Jim's versions of Thanos, but then there was like whenever I would draw, like in the Avengers, I had to draw Captain Marvel, I would go and look at Jim's version, get the way Jim draws the cheekbones, the way he narrows it down on the jawline, the way some characters' ears are slightly different. I mean, I try to be the police sketch artist with that, and for me that's one of the things that I did enjoy. As many characters as anybody, from Jim, Mark, or anyone would throw in, my job is to make sure that they are the characters that I recognize, that I grew up with. You don't draw Dick Tracy with a button nose. You don't draw Charlie Brown with hair. So I try to be respectful to the creators of the characters, and of course, Thanos was my first time actually drawing Thanos, and I wanted to make sure that it was someone that Jim would approve of. So that's my goal, is to make sure that I honored Jim's vision.
Yeah, the toughest thing was getting the characters themselves, because Marvel had a bunch of different editors who handled the different books, and not all of them wanted them in the books. The X-Men editor, Bob Harris, at the time said, no, we're not doing any of them. And I think it was Tom DeFalco said, you got to let them use some X-Men because this is everybody else. And so I think we got Cyclops and the Wolverine. Then the book sold really well, and the books that had tied into it sold really well. So when we got around to doing the Infinity War, everybody wanted their book characters in there. And there was like a number of characters like Nighthawk and Sleepwalker, who I had no idea who they were. And they said, no, you got to put these people in the book. And I think Sleepwalker at one point walks through the background with one of the panels, and that's it. That's all I knew how to do.
Yeah, similar to what happened in Crisis on Infinite Earths, which obviously predated it, the fact that a lot of writers and editors didn't want to cooperate with the book, letting us use their characters until the sales figures started coming in. They said, oh sure, throw everyone in there. So suddenly the cast proportion. Although I didn't bother getting permission to get a lot of those characters anyway. I just threw them. If they appeared in Who's Who, they appeared in Crisis at that point.
And later on, when we these things kept going on through the war and then the Crusade, one editor in particular, who I won't get a name, was really angry that I was getting these books to do.
Yeah.
And so when we got to the Crusade, he was causing so much trouble that DeFalco said, we're going to take this list off the list of the new books, and we'll just say it's not happening, but you keep working on it, and we'll put it on when it's time to get drawn. And I ran into this editor up at Marvel, the one who had been giving all the trouble. And he came gloating over and went, oh, what you doing these days? And I said, just different things. And he said, it's too bad about that Crusade book. You know, it might have been good, but we have to move on. And I said, okay, yeah. And, you know, he walked off, and then about 2 weeks later, we found out.
That's amazing. And now $1 billion movie. Now, if you guys have read these giant titans of books, I just reread all three the last 2 days because I wanted to put myself back in that world. It was a great journey, man. It had been like 5 years. You'll notice the colors are insane. There's a lot of bright pinks and orange, and eternity looks like eternity. I love that comics had that take. Was there a conversation where there was a conflict between an editor, like you just kind of touched on, where like something was too out there in the pages, like, we want to make this page bright pink and eternity is a main character? Was there anything you butted heads story-wise or artistically?
No, we were working with Craig Anderson on this, and Craig pretty well let us have our head most of the time.
Oh yeah, we're never given any kind of a restriction on. And I also, I'm drawing in black and white, so whatever the color decision was, it had nothing to do with it. But the fact that no, these were the way the characters were. This was at a time when they weren't ashamed to be doing comic books with the garish colors that came with the industry. So of course everyone had these bright, unrealistic colors, but that's what comics were. You know, and I do kind of miss that, where everything's been muted down, almost like we're trying to disguise the fact that these are superheroes and fantasy characters. You know, but we were never mandated to do anything but produce the characters as they were. You know.
Most of the things like you were talking about would have come from John Romita Sr., who was the art director at the time. And over the years, Stan would say things to him like, oh, this green cover didn't sell very well. And so that became a rule as far as John was concerned, and for a number of years, which was really tough on the Hulk book, you had to avoid green covers. And finally, John retired, and the green covers haven't sunk the business yet.
Now, all four of you have been responsible for some characters that are kind of unlikable. I mean, even Wolverine, when he first came out, like, Wolverine wasn't the most lovable scamp, and now he's everywhere. Was there ever a time you were writing a character and you thought, oh, I don't know if this will go over well because he's chomping on a cigar and he's, a short little guy from Canada, or, Thanos, you were talking before about how he's a villain, but you like leaning that direction. Have you ever been halfway through a book and been like, he's kind of a grumpy uncle, that's not for me? Has there been a change midway for like a negative choice from a character? Artistically or writing?
Particularly at the beginning, I used to get into the middle of books and change everything in the middle of the story. But it was never because I was afraid a character was going to rub somebody the wrong way. It was usually something I saw. I was in the middle of the Captain Marvel Metamorphosis issue, and I was coming back from a party and saw a paper garbage bag on the street corner that had this grease stain on it. And I went, wow, that's a really interesting shape. And that shape went back to the apartment with me, and I suddenly changed some pages in there, and Eon, the character with the big eyeball in the face, he was the grease stop, and he became part of the storyline.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but afraid of offending or bothering somebody? No, it never occurred.
For me,
please.
No, for me, since I was at that time, particularly in my the Marvel years, before I went over to DC, I was the artist, and I wasn't the creative force the way Jim was. So I just drew the best I could what they gave me. I figured Roy and Marv or whoever I was working with, they knew those characters. I just followed suit.
Now with Wolverine, I've always loved that he's been short, and I've always wanted to ask you particularly this question. I think Hugh Jackman, other than the height, is the perfect Wolverine.
He's a freak.
He can do everything.
Danny DeVito was out of town that week. Bob Hoskins is Wolverine. I think he was conceived of, right? The guy from Roger Rabbit. But America can't love a short man. Apparently, that's the lesson we learned from all the Wolverine movies.
Tom Hardy's only 5'8", even though he's everybody else. I'm still fingers crossed. So one more question. We'll start doing some fan questions. If you guys want to start lining up, we'll have about 10 minutes of fan questions, maybe 15. My final question for all of these gentlemen is, you've been in this industry for a long time. Did you, and this is probably the most generic question, but I gotta know, did you ever expect it to take over the minds and dreams of so many people to such a level that we're in Hawaii and a gentleman's walking out with a Black Panther shirt?
Shall I start at this end?
Please.
I came to America as an immigrant kid. I couldn't read, I couldn't write English. I saw comic books. I said, I must have been enamored with comic books. I started to draw comic books with crayons on lined paper, like all of us. This is what I wanted to do to make me happy, knowing I would never make any money at it because there was no money, right? And suddenly the whole, I think it's like Star Wars. It's like you can't kill it if you try, right? I mean it's going to be around forever. And I'm very proud of it. I mean, but you know, it's funny. I go to a party, like a normal person party. And they go, what do you do? I go, oh, I do comic books. They say, oh, my mother threw away all my comic books. You know, everybody's got a story. Everybody loves comic books. Even my last girlfriend, we went to see one of the Wolverine movies, and she's not into comic books at all. And she, at the end of it, she went, oh, he's kind of cool. I'm glad you think so. He's been buying you dinner for a while now. So I'm happy to be associated with Wolverine and the Infinity. As George said earlier, we are the unmopped top four back together again.
Yeah, I mean, to show how I was a boy from the South Bronx in New York, and we couldn't even afford lined paper to draw on, so I actually drew on old grocery bags. Whenever my mom was, either going to throw it away, or my brother and I would just tear up the bags and just start drawing on it, And that's when I started reading comics. I was a Spanish-speaking household, so it taught me how to read English, and that's all I really wanted to do was just to draw. And then when I went to my first comic convention in freshman year of high school, and met other comic professionals for the first time, and realized this is what I wanted to do. And that's all I wanted to do. Did I ever imagine that this is how my life would become, and this is how big the industry would become? Never. In fact, I remember two things that they warned me about in doing comic books, or being interested in comic books. A, you're not going to make much money on that. B, you're never going to meet any girls that way. I am glad that they were both very, very wrong. Yes. The fact that, thankfully, because of doing Wonder Woman, I developed a very nice, large female and gay following. I'm very proud of that. But the fact that all I ever wanted to do was draw comics, to be rewarded to do what you've wanted to do since you were a child. How can I not be grateful for a life that makes me the envy of kings? Thank you.
Myself, as a child, I always dreamed of leading a movement that would take general civilization over the cliff's edge. So I think I've begun to push us in that direction. And please, but seriously, I'm pretty much in the same boat as George. I've enjoyed this run as doing what we're doing, and I wouldn't have traded my life for anything.
What they said.
Can I just add something? Very few people in life get asked their autograph. Very few people in life have somebody come up to them and say, you were so important in my childhood. Thank you for being there. You made my life easier. You've inspired me. It's better than working for a living.
I love that.
Oh, yeah, you've been so patient. One second. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's so true. I mean, you never can imagine. My wife keeps trying to tell me, get used to it, you're a celebrity. I can't buy that. I mean, I'm playing in a child's playpen here, and I'm getting paid money for it. How lucky can one person be in a lifetime? Thank you.
So, good Sir Hulk, you have been very patient. I respect you. I appreciate you. What's up,
Get
man?
angry, please. We don't want you when you're angry.
Why a snap? Why not anything else? Why a snap? Why a snap?
Why a snap? Why not something else?
Why a snap?
That's the easiest thing I could think of him doing to obliterate anybody. It was just, I don't even think I gave it any real thought. It just happened.
Boy, crazy boy.
I was more interested in him. I put much more thought into him standing in front of that thing that said God or whatever his name was, or whatever it was. And then the snapping the finger just happened.
Spider-Man 3 could have been much more interesting if we'd known earlier that was a thing.
Two snaps.
Both halves, come on. Do you have another question? Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate your patience.
Aloha, guys. Thank you for visiting us. My question is for the whole panel. I don't know if you guys can hear me. As far as when you guys are killing off characters in your series, what's the worst criticism or feedback that you guys got back from writers and editors?
When you guys are killing off characters, what's the worst feedback you've gotten back from fans or writers when you're Game of Thrones in them?
I mean, it depends on the characters. Some characters, they say good. I mean, for me, it had nothing to do with Infinity Gauntlet. It was when I killed Terra. I mean, that one, of course, and with Supergirl and the Flash, of course, I was a giant killer everywhere. And the fact that the two characters we killed ended up having two successful TV shows. It's amazing what a comeback will do.
When I killed off Captain Marvel, a month or so afterwards, Marvel got this letter from a fellow who said he was Captain Marvel, and he was really pissed off that I killed him, and he was going to do in my family and myself. I did have my family coming to visit at that point, and he put his return address on the envelope. So I did a little checking and found out that I didn't have to worry about him because he had stabbed one of his fellow classmates about 2 weeks before, and he wasn't going to get out of jail for a while. That's right.
Comics are intense, guys.
Aloha to all you Shazam fans. The new movie Shazam's coming out. And we have Asher Angel doing autographs in the autograph pavilion.
1 second, T'Challa.
Asher Angel plays Billy Batson in the new Shazam film, is doing autographs in the autograph pavilion in the back of the hall. Thanks, guys. Mahalo.
Okay, I think we're good.
This is a slightly selfish question, seeing as I am King of Wakanda here. But I was wondering, what did you guys would think of, since we're not doing Netflix anymore, and that's kind of out, having Black Panther be the Man Without Fear in New York for a limited TV series streaming? Would that be good?
The delegate from Wakanda wants to know if you think a limited series of Black Panther as the Man Without Fear would work.
Since we don't have Daredevil anymore.
Not a decision I need to make.
That sort of puts him as a fish out of water. I mean, he's got his appeal because of his environment as much as his character. And in New York, he'd just be Daredevil. So why bother? Let's keep him where he's interesting.
My last question was, how would you introduce, say, Storm and maybe 3 X-Men into Black Panther 2?
Black Panther is a Storm. Storm is a Black Panther.
And there's the soundbite. I can't argue that. That's just science.
Thank you.
This is for Jim. So with all your cosmic stories, they always have huge stakes and really powerful villains. How do you figure out okay, this is a good, a proper way they can defeat the villain? Or do you ever have trouble with that part?
Usually when I approach any story, I've come with a theme. I want to do a story about anything from, capital punishment to nihilism, and working with that theme, I tend to structure things around, and all the other elements become secondary to wanting to get that particular idea across. Are we reverberating as much out to you folks as we are to ourselves?
Yeah, we're hearing something behind us.
Yeah, okay. But that's it, basically, and it's, I work it out and, with what the idea is, and then I go from there and tinker with things until I've got a story.
I have a brief interruption. I thought of a thing that I gotta ask, and I'm being selfish. I have a microphone. We've talked about killing characters and the death of characters. Creativity is so important. I'm sure all of you are creatives, you're into comics, those things are vital. What is your creative process? You've all invented characters in your own right, and a lot of huge characters. When you come up with the idea of a character, you were talking about the grease on the bag, you've all designed characters for the first time. Do you have like a ceremony, like do you wake up, have coffee, and start writing? Do you have anything that spurs your creativity, that helps you shape the day? Like, what's your creative process like? We'll start down the end. Like Wolverine, how does that start?
I know it's an ethereal thing, but Rembrandt sat down every day and got to work because he had to do something today, When you talk to the actors who did The Godfather or Gone with the Wind or something like that, how was it to work on this great, enormous job? It's a job. We showed up. We did it. They expected us to be professional. They expected us to be good. You sit down and you get to work, right? So, obviously we all have a lot of history so that we can kick into our instincts, which are built on decades of knowing what the hell we're doing. But sometimes I notice a lot of songwriters say, I don't know how I did it, I just started to hear the words in my head and I played with it. And I believe the creative process is probably letting yourself open to what comes in instead of planning out where you're going to be going later. It's sort of a combination of both. You got to know where you're going to wind up, but then you improvise how to get there.
I know that because I've always loved doing it. That in itself was a motivation. And I know when I've lectured at art schools for young artists, aspiring artists who are all out to get my job. Basically, I think you're an artist when you can't imagine not being one. When the idea of creating is so much a force for you that it doesn't feel like effort. It feels like something that you want to do. The fact that you're also motivated by needing to pay your mortgage, needing to pay your bills, of course, then that becomes part of the job. But the fact that you've been given a talent, you found a market for that talent, and you're welcomed into that community of creators, and obviously with people who you're affecting all over the world, that's pretty good motivation. When I've got it, and particularly if I'm working with someone, a good writer who's really spurring my creative juices on, I have a hard time going to sleep because I want to be back at my drawing board, and I can't really imagine what my life would have been without that.
Yeah, for me, it's just living with the story for a while. It's like taking walks in the woods. You're driving around in a car, reading a book, getting ideas out of something there. Occasionally, some artificial inspiration, which is why I've never been asked to teach in a school. And basically, it's just running into the parts that you don't like and working around them until they're all gone, and then you sit down at the typewriter and you start putting it together. A lot of this, I'm doing it now, is a lot of it, I think about it a lot before I go to sleep, which helps me go to sleep at night, and I sometimes come up with some good ideas that way.
Yeah, I don't have much of a process. I look at these guys, so it just, the story is fantastic. So anything that spurs my imagination, turn out the pages, and it's not really work for me. I just love it so much, but until deadline's it, then it turns into real work. But another one.
Thank you, sir. Once again, I got creativity. I had to know it was a whole thing.
That was actually really good because I'm a writer too, so that was very valuable advice. My question was a little bit not as deep though. If you guys could have or use any infinity gem, which one would it be and what would you use it for?
We'll start with you. The pressure. I went that way last time. Any infinity gem, which one and how would you use it?
I'm afraid other than the different colors, I don't even know what they do.
One does stuff, blue one does other stuff. I'll take the power gem.
I always imagine that if you want to make a good one, just put M&Ms on his one.
That's what the green room looks like. A bunch of us putting M&Ms in our goblet.
Yeah,
so.
I think the one is peanuts.
Next year, there will be the chocolate gauntlet. I'm guaranteeing it. For sale. Chocolate gauntlet. You won't get a cut of it, you won't get it.
Thanos against the Oompa Loompas.
That's what the M's in M&M is. Marvel and Marvel, guys. We've known this the whole time. So power gem for you. Any goals? Any nefarious means?
No.
I would probably go for the reality gem and get rid of the electoral college. Little bit of politics, sorry. Won't do it again.
So, and then we're going to rock an M&M's gauntlet, damn it. So yes, thank you, man. Enjoy writing.
Which stone would you like Stanley to reside in?
Which stone would you like Stan Lee to reside in?
Oh, the soul gem. Soul gem. Now we can hang out with Pip.
Hi, sir. My question is, do you ever see Thanos to be somewhat satisfied in any way or have enough, because he already has the power or something like that. So do you ever see him be satisfied? Because he seems to be not satisfied even though he have all the powers and everything.
When I met Jack Kirby, during our conversation, he told me the Hulk was stupidity. That the harder you beat on him, the stronger he becomes. I love that. And so when I came around to doing Thanos, he is dissatisfaction. That is his theme. He's never happy with what's going to happen, and how many times does he gain omnipotence and toss it aside or let somebody steal it? So he's really a high maintenance relationship, and you don't want to date this guy.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, did we lose Thanos? We got time for Thanos to do. Oh, we lost. How we doing, man?
Good. I'm going to switch it up. I want to ask Jim. My favorite Batman story is Cult, and I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that. And, I'm hoping to get my book signed tomorrow. I missed today at 10.
Okay, your favorite Batman story was
Cult?
Oh, the Cult. Okay, yes. Oh, that was terrific to work on. Bernie was a neighbor, so we learned that the only way you're going to get work out of Bernie is by stopping over once a week and looking at the artwork, jazzing him up and keeping him going. And so that's for a while why he only worked with Ron Mars and I, because we knew enough to do this. It was really fun. It was kind of strange because Bernie was having his first child. His first son was being born around that time. And I would bring in the script and he'd read it over and he'd go, "Oh man, this is really grisly." And I'm going, "This is Bernie Wrightson I'm talking to, right?" But he got past that, and he was just fun to work with. And when I work with Ron and I very much have a very similar eye to how the artwork should look down there on the page. And so I always got exactly what I expected from Ron. And at the same time I was working with Bernie, who had a whole different eye than I did. And it never looked like I envisioned it, but it always worked so well, I didn't care. but yeah, the cult was a lot of fun in that regard. They did force me to use Robin again, but I got him worked in so he could come in and go, and then we could get back to Batman, you know.
Hey Jim, as an artist, did you ever think to do those little layouts for your scripts like so many other artists did, so you would get what you wanted?
No, I basically do, and I think I was doing it even back on Infinity. Didn't I give you like a panel arrangement?
You described it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Lately I've been doing panel arrangements for people on the page, and there was a note on top saying, you can disregard this. This is just so I don't have to go big panel, little panel, and so on and so forth. But most of the time I just want the artist to run off and do the same thing. Yeah, you know, it's just it's a shorthand of giving an idea of what the page should basically look like, but let their aesthetic values rule. Yeah.
Also, it helps for the writer to keep track of the pacing of the story as well. So you know pretty much what's happening in this page, so you know how much, particularly by the time you reach the 22nd or 25th page, that you've got the story all in there, you know.
And if you're math impaired like I am, it'll tell you how many panels, you better stop writing panels at a certain point.
So we're going to end the line at blue shirt, gentlemen. Thanos, ask away.
I wanted to ask about death.
It's all around.
What, do you know something we don't?
I was disappointed she wasn't in the movie because she's such a big part of Thanos' motivation.
5G decided that the abstract entities, they weren't quite ready to bring them into the Marvel Universe. That's why Eternity hasn't showed up in Strange and that, but I think with the Strange movies, they were going to start slowly working those in, and they made so much bloody money off of Thanos so far that I don't think this next movie is going to be the last time you see him. So there's a chance Mr. Death could still come back around, especially with Josh Brolin lobbying to get more Thanos roles.
In the comic Infinity Gauntlet, did she exist or was she only in Thanos' mind?
I couldn't hear that. I figured that she actually exists because he's living with her now, and other people have gone to the Death's domain and come back. So I figured I never quite got around to this in Captain Marvel, but I wanted only Captain Marvel and Thanos to see her. In fact, I think there's some mention in one of the stories that Marvel does say who's the hooded figure or something like that. But I always figured most everybody else wouldn't be able to see her. So maybe it's a little bit of both.
I still want the rom-com of Deadpool, Thanos, and death. I'm still hoping. The dream is real, guys. Yes, sir.
Hi, Jim. Earlier you were explaining how when you created Thanos, you didn't want a one-dimensional character. And I remember reading, his question about death. When I first read, Thanos was in love with death, and then in the movies, he's seeking balance. So my question is, and then one of the things he did is he had to sacrifice Gamora, which is a theme I think that I saw in Dreadstar too, which is another story that you wrote. What is your world like? How did you conceptualize what Thanos' world or universe vision is?
The writer Norman Mailer once said that no true story ends in anything but death. You have these superhero stories, and every issue is high stakes game. And nobody wins all the time. So my idea when I approached the stories, more so with Marvel and Thanos, was the fact that you can't always win. Early on, I remember a Kirby and Lee story as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they lose at the end. And I thought, that's terrific. I mean, they won the next issue, of course, but it struck me as such a powerful thing at the time. I wanted these gambits to sometimes not work out, and I think it makes for a much more interesting story that way. Welcome.
All right, guys, we are out of time. I want you to give it up for Joe Rubinstein, George Perez, Jim for attending. That was childhood redefining for me. I appreciate it.